But when I hear people talk about balanced budgets, give me a break. The first bill that you are bringing to the floor, according to CBO, adds $114 billion to the debt. So we don't need any lectures from anybody on that side about balancing the budget. Give me a break. And I would like to, maybe the gentleman could, again, share with us the secret addendum that apparently was negotiated behind closed doors, so we actually know what agreements were made. I mean, 4 days and 15 votes, and there's only one change in the rules package, going from 5 to be able to vacate the chair to 1. Well, there's a lot more to it. We all know that, but that's a big secret. So much for transparency.
This is Democratic Congressman Jim McGovern ripping into Kevin McCarthy and House Republicans, given the fact that their very first bill, the first one they introduced, would add $114 billion to the debt. That bill was introduced all of 3 days after Kevin McCarthy stood up at the lectern and said this:
"There is nothing more important than making it possible for American families to live and enjoy the lives they deserve. That is why we commit to stop wasteful Washington spending, to lower the price of groceries, gas, cars, housing, and stop the rising national debt."
So, just to reiterate, Kevin McCarthy, in his very first remarks as Speaker, vowed to, quote, "stop the rising national debt," and then 72 hours later, Republicans introduced legislation to rescind IRS funding that, according to the Congressional Budget Office, would actually increase the deficit by over $100 billion. It took all of 3 days for Republicans to drop all pretenses that they ever cared about the rising national debt and instead pivot right back to coddling the rich. And let's be crystal clear here, that's what this move would do. Republicans would have you believe that a, quote, "army of 87,000 IRS agents is coming to knock down your door and take all of your money." Ronnie Jackson tweeted, "Tonight I will vote to defund the 87,000 IRS agents hired to go after you." Representative Mary Miller said, "Tonight I am voting to defund Biden's army of 87,000 IRS agents hired to go after the American people." Dan Bishop, "I voted to defund the Democrat IRS army. The last thing that hardworking Americans need are more meddling bureaucrats." Now, there are so many things wrong with this claim. The Inflation Reduction Act funds the IRS with about $80 billion. That funding will allow the agency to hire an estimated 87,000 employees, not just auditors, but total employees that the IRS will need to hire over the next decade. Not right now, but over 10 years. The IRS is currently composed of 79,000 employees, and of those 79,000, only 10,000 are agents, and 20% of those agents investigate tax crimes. In reality, the most common jobs at the IRS are the 13,000 customer service representatives who answer your calls when you have questions, and the 10,000 seasonal employees who file mail or transcribe data, mostly during tax season. Of the 87,000 IRS employees expected to be hired this decade, the vast majority, over 50,000 of them, will simply replace those current employees who are expected to retire. In other words, any way you cut this, the information being fed to you by the GOP is outright disinformation. Also, sorry to bury the lead here, but unless you're committing tax fraud, who cares? I don't care if the IRS hires 1 million agents and arms them with swords and a shield. I don't cheat on my taxes. I have nothing to worry about. And if you don't cheat on your taxes, then you have nothing to worry about either. But if you're committing the felony of tax fraud, then yeah, I can see why more employees at the IRS would be concerning. So if you're one of those people who's suddenly freaking out about there being more IRS agents, then you might just be telling on yourself. In reality, think about who actually benefits when audits decrease. From 2010 to 2018, when Republicans were successful in gutting the IRS, audit rates for those reporting between $1 and $75,000 in annual income fell from 0.5% to 0.3%. But audit rates for those making more than $75,000 fell from 1% to 0.1%. That's a 90% decrease. And for those making more than $10 million, the rate went from 20% to 5.3%, a 75% decrease. Starting to understand yet who benefits from less IRS enforcement? Because here's a hint, it's not low-income earners. And here's another hint, all of those Republican lawmakers and operatives and media personalities losing their minds right now over this aren't low-income earners either. But according to a statement put out by 3 former IRS commissioners appointed by both Democratic and Republican presidents, the increased funding from the Inflation Reduction Act would add the capacity to enforce the tax laws against sophisticated taxpayers who today evade their tax obligations freely because they know that the IRS lacks the tools it needs to pursue them. I don't know how many more ways we can say this. Rich people benefit from less IRS enforcement, but rich people need to convince poor people that they're the ones being targeted because it's not popular enough to just say that rich people should be able to avoid paying taxes. So that's why we're seeing a barrage of fear porn warning about 87,000 new IRS agents. Republican politicians aren't protecting you, they are protecting themselves. They're just using you as a front while doing it. Also, to drive this point home even further, consider the Treasury Secretary has already directed that none of the additional tax enforcement funding provided in the Inflation Reduction Act will be used to increase audit rates for small businesses or households with incomes less than $400,000 a year. So even if the data showing that more audits actually target the rich don't convince you, just listen to the fact that the government is coming out and just outright telling us that the only people who will be impacted by increased IRS funding will be the wealthy. And finally, can we please stop pretending that Republicans actually care about fiscal conservatism or reducing the debt? The last time Republicans had full control of government under Trump from 2016 to 2018, they added $7.8 trillion to the debt. We're not talking about the 1950s here. This example is literally from like 5 years ago. And ironically enough, when they blew up the deficit that time, guess what it was for? A tax cut that favored, wait for it, millionaires and billionaires. Are you starting to get it? Republicans have all these showy terms that they use to pat themselves on the back, but at the end of the day, they don't give a shit about any of that. Their sole priority is helping rich people. Period. Do not listen to what these people say, watch what they do. And over and over and over, what they do is throw every single purported value and principle by the wayside the moment they take power if it means that they or their rich donors get to hold on to more cash. It's money here and everything else down here. And this is a rot that pervades the entirety of the GOP. We just found out that Donald Trump paid all of $750 in federal taxes in 2016 to 2017. These people are content to make millions or billions, but pay into our education system, pay toward fixing roads, pay the police and firefighters they love to virtue signal about. As soon as it comes to time to support the system they profit from, they cosplay like Revolutionary War soldiers and pretend that somehow it makes them patriots not to pay taxes so that they can hoard every dime they've ever made. So rest assured, every flowery talking point these Republicans debuted while trying to win your vote will be summarily discarded in place of whatever policy helps their own bottom lines. They are in it for the money and nothing more. Not states' rights, not the police, not the military, not the Constitution, not fiscal conservatism or balancing the budget, and not reining in wasteful spending. They just want money, and every single one of their actions prove that. Before you go, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please make sure to subscribe to my channel. You can click the thumbnail right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work even further, the best way is to subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. There you can check out my interviews with major players in the world of politics, including President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, Katie Porter, Jamie Raskin, and so many more. Plus other interviews that live exclusively on the podcast. That link is also right here on this screen, or just search No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen wherever you listen to podcasts.